In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a Google Search Console data source to your Looker Studio dashboard, and then add a custom field to that data source that separates out branded and non-branded queries. This is important when you're doing SEO because showing up for branded terms, meaning your brand name or a brand name of a client that you're working with, is really important. Obviously, you want to show up for your own brand name, but a lot of the work we do in SEO is to show up for topical searches that don't include your brand name. So to be able to separate them out and see how you're performing over time is really helpful. To do it, we're going to be adding this custom field, and then we're going to be using a case statement within the custom field. I really love case statements in Looker Studio. They're super powerful for adding new dimensions to your data to make it more useful. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is show you how I added the Search Console data source. If you're not familiar with the Google Search Console, it's a tool provided by Google that shows you the organic search queries that people use to find your website. And I think importantly, it shows queries where you got impressions, but people didn't even click, which means you really get a lot of data because odds are you show up for a lot of more queries than you realized. So if you're not familiar with it, look up Google Search Console. We're not going to go into that in depth now, but let me show you how to add the data source. So click Resource, Manage Added Data Sources. We're going to add a data source. We're going to go down to the bottom here, pick Search Console. Then I'm going to find my website. And we want the site impression. So URL impression has some things that for our purposes, it shows the page URL that a query showed up for. I'm going to use the site impression, which is just shows us queries and their impressions, click, average position. And then for our purposes, we want the search type to be web. That's what you're most familiar with in Google. That's the regular listings that show up if you do a search on google.com. We're going to go ahead and add that. And just to take a quick look at this data source, you can see over here we do get device, Google property you showed up on, and then the things that I mentioned, query, average position, clicks, impression. So that's how we got this data. Now let's create a case statement. To add the case statement, the first thing we're going to do is go back to our data source. Since I added a second of this Search Console data source, I'm going to go ahead and remove the second one. And I'm going to go to edit this data source. And you see up here, I can add a field. So this is where we can add calculated fields. I'll also point out there's this add group option. That's really similar to what we're going to be doing with the case statement. Google added this recently. And I think what they were trying to do is they recognized how powerful the case statement is. But we are going to be writing a little bit of code, which can be off-putting to people. So they created a way to do something like a case statement, but without having to write code. Honestly, I've tried it. Yeah, if you see code on a screen and it freaks you out, you may want to try that. But honestly, I think it's as complicated as adding a case statement, and the case statement is more powerful, more flexible. So we're going to click this Add Calculated Field. And I'm going to call my field branded, non-branded, and we're going to start writing a case statement. Now, before we do this, let me just talk you through the ingredients of a case statement. We'll start with a general example, and then we'll get into the case statement where we're going to create to identify branded and non-branded queries. So this is a general example of a case statement. And the idea with a case statement is you can sort of think of it like when this is the case, then do this. When this other thing is the case, then do this. So the structure of a case statement looks like this. You have a bunch of when-then conditions that behave a lot like if-then statements, if you're familiar with those. Like if this is true, then do this. In this case, the then is just returning a value, and that's going to be the value of that column in the data. So let's have a look. This is the case statement we're going to create to identify branded and non-branded traffic. So let's break it down. Every case statement has to have a case at the beginning and an end at the end. Pretty straightforward. And then you have a series of these if-then like conditions. It really is the same thing. It's just we're saying when and then instead of if and then. So you can think of it as when this is true, then do this. So in this case, what it's doing is it's taking the query from the Google Search Console data, and if 2 Octobers exists in that query, then label that query as branded. Now let's look at this contains text statement for a second. This is a formula that you can use in calculated fields in Looker Studio, and it really is just like it sounds. We say we have this contains text, and then we say we're going to pass it, in our case, the query. That's the source expression. And then what is the thing that we're searching for? In our case, that's the branded term. Here, I've added a second row because sometimes when people search for 2 Octobers, they add a space and sometimes they don't. And so I want to identify both of those as branded. And you can imagine, like with your brand, there may be a variety of different ways that people search. So it could be misspellings. It could be, I've run into it a lot with organic search data that there are different ways that people search for brands. So you might end up with more than 2 statements in your case to identify your branded traffic, and you can have as many when conditions as you want. The next thing I've done is added this else condition. So if none of these when statements is true, in my case, if 2 Octobers with a space is not found or 2 Octobers is not found in a query, then label that query as non-branded. And to finish things off, we have that end statement. So that's the structure of a case statement. Now let's build one. So my case statement is going to look exactly like what I just showed you. So we're going to say when, then contains text and query, and then 2 Octobers, and then and branded. And I'm just going to copy this line, save myself a little typing. And I'm going to get rid of that space. And you see here, I didn't mention it before, but I can have multiple rows returning the same value. So I can have as many rows returning branded as I want. Then else, non-branded. And that's it. So we're going to save this and add it to our report. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop-down so we can, or a selector, so we can pick branded and non-branded. So I'm going to go to Insert. Then I actually want a fixed size list. Drop that in here. Change this dimension to my branded, non-branded. And we don't really, I don't care about clicks. I'm going to get rid of that. The other thing I'm going to do is go to Style. And I'm going to get rid of that search box. I don't really care about that either. Make this a little smaller. Now you can see, so now we can select branded and non-branded. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to click this again just to show everything. Click in here. And now that I have this branded, non-branded, I just want to show you another cool thing you can do with this. We go Insert, Time Series, drop this in here, and I'm going to switch this to Impressions. Clicks or Impressions would be fine, but I like Impressions. And I'm going to drag this out. And then the other thing I'm going to do is take this date field. I'm going to switch it to just show year and month. Then I'm going to go here and I'm going to add this breakdown dimension and I'm going to add my branded, non-branded. So look at that. See, isn't that cool? You can see how your branded and non-branded traffic is trending over time. And I did a little bit of formatting with this. I'm going to pull a little Julia Child and show you the finished product, but this is it. Functionally, we've got everything that we set out to do. So we've got the ability to select and filter our table and just see branded or non-branded terms and see them trending over time. A slightly prettier version here, so we can view that, and voila, there it is. If you enjoyed this and found it helpful, please click the like button, subscribe to see more videos, and check out 2octobers.com if you'd like help with GA4, Looker Studio, BigQuery, analytics, marketing analytics, data in general. We love helping people. So thanks again for watching.